Welcome back to Casual EDH. My name is Chris, as always, and today I'm going to be talking about mana rocks. So my last video I was talking about land ramp and how basically ways of getting lands into play as a form of mana acceleration. I did mention in that video that I preferred lands over rocks, and that's because they're more protected, they're less likely to get blown up, they're less volatile. And actually a lot of land ramp options are just less expensive, like wallet-wise, right? Like actual USD. However, they do kind of cap out after a while, right? So for most of the land ramp, you're looking at generating one additional mana per turn unless you're playing multiple ramps or you have some of the specialty spells, but at that point you also already have a lot of lands usually. With mana rocks, though, you can tend to get a lot of really cheap ones out very quickly and really accelerate your mana. It's not as protected, but there is a format where that doesn't really matter as much, and that's CEDH, because typically those games are going to be like 1 to 3 turns, or 50. It really depends on what kind of decks are in that particular pod. But CH is where you really see rocks being more important than lands. So I guess the first question is, what am I talking about when I'm talking about mana rocks? So ones that pretty much everyone's going to be familiar with are the ones that are from the Commander Structure decks, and they keep getting reprinted because they're pretty good, right? So I'm talking about your Soul Ring. This is just like the granddaddy. In fact, this is so strong it really kind of should be banned. Let's be completely honest. Arcane Signet, been very prevalent the last few years. Commander Sphere, you do still see this in play a lot. It's a little bit more expensive, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then other ones you do see frequently, but maybe not every deck, are things like Felwar Stone, your Signet Cycle, and even your Talisman Cycle has been popping up more and more frequently lately. So just a quick thing about mana rocks in general. I don't remember who I heard it from, but generally what I heard was, when you're looking at rocks, you kind of want to see for each 2 mana you put into it, you get at least 1 back per activation. And that's because you can kind of get your mana back after a couple of turns. You don't really want to go into a mana deficit for playing them, which makes Soul Ring just ridiculous because you pay 1 mana and you get 2. Arcane Signet is very strong. It's pay 2 mana, get 1 of any color. It's actually an improvement over like the Signet Cycle from Ravnica. But you can play them together, so they're still very useful. Commander Sphere is another one you see a lot. It's a 3 mana, taps for 1 of any color, and then it has an effect. These generally aren't seen as favorable, and usually what you do is you're playing them based on the effect that they grant, as well as the mana. Typically, if you're looking for just mana, you want to pay 2 for 1. You don't really want to get into the 3 for 1 range. But some of these 3 for 1s are kind of relevant just because of their secondary effects, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit because I have other ones I want to show. The good thing about Commander Sphere is to sacrifice it to draw a card is something you can do at any time. It's not a tap activation, so you can tap it for mana and then sacrifice it. Or you can just sacrifice it at, instant speed or whatnot. You don't have to really worry about it, and that's what makes that kind of strong. Felwar Stone is an older card. It used to be a little bit harder to get. It's been reprinted quite a bit lately. And it is a 2 mana, taps for 1, and it taps for any color that your opponents could produce. Any land that they could produce. Which is nice, because something like Command Tower could produce all colors, even if theirs can't, because of their commander colors. So if they have like a Command Tower out, it still taps for all colors, so it kind of makes it an Arcane Signet. And there's other like City of Brass and things like that do that too. So yeah, you're going to see these around quite a bit too, especially for off-color decks. When I say that, I mean like colors that don't normally ramp as well, like basically non-green decks. Signets, there's a Signet for each 2-color combo from Ravnica. These were based from the original Ravnica. If you're playing a 2 or 3 color deck, you're going to see these quite frequently. You do have to pay 1 to tap into them, and they produce 1 of each of the color pair. So in this case, Boros Signet is red and white. It's a little bit more restrictive on how you use it, but still pretty good. It nets you 1 mana total, so really Arcane Signet does kind of the same thing with a little bit more flexibility. But again, this is a more recent addition to the game, just since like 2019 with Eldraine. So, although it's been reprinted to death since then, so there's just so many in circulation, you're not going to have any problems getting it. And Talismans. Talismans first showed up in, I want to say, original Mirrodin. but it may have been one of the other ones in that block. Doesn't matter. For 2 mana, they have tap for a colorless or tap for a basically one of a color pair, kind of like the signets, except it hurts you. So if you don't want to take pain, you just tap it for colorless. If you do want to take pain, tap it for one of the colors. I'm really going over these ones here because these are very important to the game. You see these at most levels of play, and you just see them kind of everywhere. So I just kind of want to go over them and their advantages, disadvantages. If you could only take 3 of these for your deck, like if you have room for 3 rocks and you can only take 3, I would take Soul Ring and Arcane Signet as an absolute, and then one of these 4 as your flex, just whatever you feel would work best for you. As far as slightly more expensive ones, you're looking at things like, so if you're looking at more expensive ones that don't have additional effects, you're looking at something like Basalt Monolith or Thran Dynamo. Thran Dynamo is 4 taps for 3, so it will get you your mana back very quickly. You're only down 1 mana the turn that you play it. And then Basalt Monolith is 3 taps for 3, but you have to pay 3 to untap it. It does untap during your untap phase. You play this in Artifact Shenanigans deck because there's so many ways to reduce the activation cost for that. You could literally tap it for 3 and then untap it for 2, tap it for 3, untap it for 2, make infinite colorless mana. There's so many ways of doing shenanigans like that. I'm not going to talk about it in this particular video because that's not the point of this video. But you are going to see that quite a bit in those types of decks. And you will see Thran Dynamo and Colorless Matters decks. You also have options like Everflowing Chalice. This has multi-kicker of 2, which means you can pay 2 any number of times. It comes into the battlefield with a charge counter for each time it was kicked. And you can tap for colorless for each charge counter on it. So this is one of those ones that you can either pay it for 2 and get 1, you can pay it for 4 and get 2, whatever you need in the game. It's very flexible. I've been seeing its play kind of falling off lately, which is a little sad, but every time they come out with new cards, you get some power creep, and then old ones get cut out, and that's kind of what you're looking at there. But still a very solid choice. And then some other ones that maybe you're not using in your decks right now, but you should. Something like Mindstone. I have been seeing a resurgence of Mindstone, actually, so maybe it's not one that you're not using in your deck now, but there was a couple years where I wasn't really seeing anyone playing it, and now I see it much more frequently. It's 2 taps for a colorless. It has 1 tap, sack it to draw a card. Late game, you don't always need that 1 mana, but you might need that 1 card, so this is a good choice. Prismatic Lens. This one I do not see anyone play, and I think this is really solid for a rock if you are on a budget. It's 2 mana and it taps for a colorless, so already it's kind of hitting that, you get half of it back. But also has 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So if you really need to play like an ultimatum or something that's very color restrictive, you could use this to filter some mana just to make sure you can cast it. People don't expect it, and it's not a terrible card. Again, it's more of a budget-friendly thing. I think it's like a 30-cent card, if that. So it can pretty much fit into any deck that you're building. And then, of course, we have the Diamond Cycle. These were reprinted last in both Baldur's Gate Commander Legends and then the original Commander's Legends. They do come into play tapped, but they do tap for a specific color of mana. So it's 2 mana, and then it will tap for a specific color depending on the diamond. So if you need to get more colored mana into your deck, maybe you're playing like Azorius or Dimir, these diamonds are a pretty solid option. If you are playing like anything with green, you really don't need to use any of the diamonds. I feel bad for the Moss Diamond. It's kind of maybe the least used one, because at that point there's a lot of really cheap land ramps, and I would absolutely take a land ramp over this for 2 mana. But for the colors that don't have that option, pretty solid. So then for like 3 mana ones, I was mentioning that 3 mana is kind of like the zone where people don't really want to pay 3 mana for them, but they might, take the cards for the effects, additional effects. So first one I'm going to show is Pristine Talisman. It has tap, add 1 mana to your mana pool, and you gain, or 1 colors to your mana pool, and you gain 1 life. There are quite a few life gain matters decks, so this fits very well into them. I run one in my Beladros deck, and pretty much anything that would trigger on life gain, you can even use it as a combat trick with like Archangel Thune or something. So it does have its niche uses. It's not something you're going to use for every deck, but it's still pretty nice. Unfortunately, it is 3 mana. Then we have Patriarch Seal. So this is a new one from Commander Legends Baldur's Gate. And I think this is one that's really going to show... It's good. People are going to be surprised at how useful this is. For 3 mana, it will tap to add 1 mana of any color. So it does give you any color mana that you need. But you can also pay 1 and tap it to untap target legendary creature you control. So for anyone who has a commander that has a tap effect, you can do it twice now. Effects like that are not necessarily at a premium, but having that effect as an optional effect on a mana rock is really strong. Really strong. If you do have a commander that has a tap effect and you're not running Patriarch Seal, do it. I think it's still a fairly inexpensive card right now too, although I think it has been creeping up a little bit because I think people are starting to see it. I run it in a Jan Jansen deck, and it is silly. Something else recently from Baldur's Gate, Decanter of Endless Water. It has tap add 1 mana of any color, which is nice, and you have no maximum hand size. So it kind of goes back to Thought Vessel, which I did not show here because I just could not find a copy that wasn't already in a deck, and I didn't really want to pull my decks apart finding one. But that one is a 2 mana, taps for colorless, has no maximum hand size, highly used. For a long time it was like a $6 to $10 card. It has been reprinted a lot recently, so it's not as expensive. And now we also have a 3 mana version of it that taps for any color. So if you have a Drawing Matters text or one where you can just get a giant hand, give Decanter a try. Oh, and I did have one more I wanted to mention. It's not a 3 mana, but it is a 4 mana. It has Stonespeaker Crystal. It's 4 mana, taps for 2, so it is getting you your half back. It also has 2 tap, sack it, exile any number of target players' graveyards, draw a card. Instant speed Bojuka Bog, you never know when you're going to need that. The ability to draw a card is also really nice. Don't look down on this one too hard. It is 4 mana, so it's a little bit hard to fit into things. But if you are running, like if your local gameplay kind of revolves around Graveyard Hate, or I should say runs around graveyards and reanimation, running some additional Graveyard Hate, never bad, and it'll just give you mana if nothing else, and possibly a draw later. So then, there's now a class of mana rocks we have not talked about yet. These are the ones that you're really going to see at the CEDH level, and these are the ones that are just truly ridiculous. I actually don't have some of them that I wanted to show, simply because they're just so expensive, like money-wise, like USD-wise, that I just could not justify keeping them if I wasn't using them. But I do have at least a couple I can show here. And they've both been reprinted recently, so their prices are down a little bit. But we're going to talk about Mana Crypt and Mana Vault. So Mana Vault is probably the least expensive I've ever seen it right now. And Mana Crypt has already crept back up. So I want to say that Mana Crypt right now is like $180 to $200, depending on where you buy it. It is 0 mana, taps for 2, but at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to flip a coin. If you lose the coin flip, you lightning bolt yourself. Very good for CEDH because you're not going to be building up that damage very much. Honestly, good for most levels of play because you can really get your commander out much earlier with it if you get it in your opening hand. And it's always going to be an expensive card. When it was reprinted, it was down to like 80, and it's already gone back up to like 200 for a standard one. And it's only been a couple of years. It doesn't take long at all. Mana Vault, it has a lot of text on it, but really the important thing is it's tap to add 3. If it's tapped during your upkeep, you take a damage, and you have to pay 4 to untap it during your upkeep if you want to untap it. But really, you're usually just using this as like as a dark ritual, kind of. And then you're maybe sacking it off to some effect, or maybe you have other effects like Unwinding Clock, so it will always untap itself without having to pay that for. Lots of shenanigans with this and cards like it. The ones I could not show were like Chrome Mox, Chrome Opal, Lion's Eye Diamond, things like that. Man, I wish I still had my Lion's Eye Diamond. Bad financial decision. About 5 years ago, I decided to sell the From the Vaults one. I don't remember how much I got for it, but it certainly did not get like the $700 or $800 it's worth now. Um, but what are you going to do? But these cards kind of are in the realm of higher play, so you're looking at probably 6+ for things like Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, and even like the Moxes, you're probably looking at like 8+ for those for the most part, just because of accessibility and usability. It's just difficult. The thing I've learned about these are their mana cost is inverse to their power. The lower the mana, the higher the power. And that's why like the 0-cost Mana Crypt and the 0-cost Moxes are the most important. Also, the lower the mana cost, the higher the actual USD you have to spend to buy one. So keep that in mind. These are not budget friendly. I have built decks where I could basically outfit an entire pod with decks, and those decks are worth less than this Mana Crypt. So it's just ridiculous. But yeah, I do want to end on a slightly friendlier note here. So as of yesterday, I actually got some secret layers in, because I am one of those people who buy secret layers. And ironically, for me making the Mana Rock video today, I got my Dan Frazier's in. So just to show off a couple of them, I really like the art on these ones, the Talisman of Resilience and Talisman of Curiosity. I just think they're super nice. You don't need to run the super fancy versions of cards. They don't make your deck any better than if you hadn't done it. But, I don't know. They just make me happy. And if you like to have... If cards like this make you happy, then go for them if you have the budget for it. So I don't really have anything else to throw in here, so I'm going to do my usual. We talked about Decanter of Endless Water, and I think it's an upcoming star for Commander, mostly because of the maximum hand size bit. We already know that Thought Vessel is very highly played, so I feel like this one could very well follow in its footsteps. So let's go ahead and mark that one, and maybe someday one of you lucky viewers will get to keep this one, and then, I don't know, look at it. I mean, what do you do with cards? They're cardboard. You just look at them. But that said, if you are still watching, thank you very much for supporting me and for watching the video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.